Greetings from Sabour. Let me express my apologies for not being with you in Pantnagar, my alma mater. Nevertheless, I wish to present my seminar on conservation agriculture based crop management for Indo-Gangetic plains. I am thankful to Dr. V.P. Singh for inviting me for this lecture. If you see the agriculture and the livelihoods as a whole, there are two major water dependent interests. One is food security and other is ecological security. The food security is also in question because of several issues that are arising in agriculture. For example, labor. Labor availability for the farming communities is really becoming a major issue, and also the escalating prices of inputs such as fertilizer, diesel, so on. I have been told that the prices of DAP, which was like 9 rupees a kilo, is now 25 rupees a kilo. Similarly for potassium. So, there is a major increase in prices of fertilizer and diesel, seeds and other inputs. There are also issues related to the stagnant productivity of major cropping systems. For example, in rice, we do not have a variety which is much higher than the Swarna or IR8 for example, and therefore, this stagnant productivity is also a cause of major concern. Similarly, in wheat and other crops too. One of the new issue that is emerging, especially in the northwest part of India, is water shortage, and this problem is now extending towards the eastern part of region, where there is apparently not much water shortage, but because of high pumping cost by diesel operated pump, farmers are not able to pump out enough water for the crops, and therefore, the whole profitability of the farming is affected adversely, and the younger generation is not willing to farm. So, whether we have answer for this kind of situation, and I will say yes, conservation agriculture based crop managements can be implied to offset these major issues. And the key elements for the conservation agriculture based crop protection is one of the like surface retention of the crop residues, minimum soil movement, efficient crop rotation for the diversification, and all of these three principles should imply immediate economic benefit to the farmers. And like these principles were identified by the farmers in US way back in 1940s, when dust bowls were common, and the farmers found that in reducing tillage and retaining some of the residues, which they called stubble mulch tillage, solved their issues. So, we need to move forward, not to till much, not to burn crop residue, but retain crop residue and improve soil productivity and risk associated with the farming. The first principle of reducing tillage is important in order to achieve a goal of determine the appropriate minimum level of tillage for a defined cropping systems, leading to zero till planting or reducing tillage to the extent possible. For example, in some crops it is not possible to zero till, but then to have a minimum tillage practice. And the key issues that we are trying to address is soil fertility, of course, but also the direct implication of tillage due to enhanced cost of cultivation and consumption of diesel on farm profitability. In this graph, as you can see, that the diesel prices are increasing tremendously. Now it's close to 50 rupees a liter, which we are likely to get even dearer one. And we have seen it has implication in soil fertility, enhance biological activity, and so on. The second principle of conservation agriculture based crop management is dealing with the keeping rational amounts of crop residues in order to improve soil fertility and reduce soil erosion in some cases and enhance water productivity by cutting evaporation demands. Other advantages of keeping residue is enhanced biodiversity and reduction in weeds. As you can see in the right upper picture, where the maize is planted conventionally, you can see a lot of weeds coming in, for example, Chenopodium album and Melilotus, whereas in left side maize is planted by zero till, but no residue. So, still there are some cypress rotundus can be seen, but on right lower side planting maize zero till with some residue can reduce weed densities to a larger extent, almost no weed in the picture. In a rice maize system, keeping residues have a dramatic improvement in productivity and profitability of maize crop. The third principle of conservation agriculture based crop management is dealing with the use of suitable and profitable crop rotation and some kind of diversification. For example, in cereal based system including legumes or pulses, so that we can achieve economically viable diversified crop rotation that can offer new options to reduce risk and enhance profitability from the farming. The fourth principle of immediate economical benefit is largely focusing on the farmers' livelihood, that the many farmers would not accept conservation agriculture based practices just because you are saving water or kind of green technologies. They need to get a fair amount of money by practicing these technologies. And the first three principles of the conservation agriculture based crop management are supposed to enhance sustainable soil management, leading to productive soil, which is mainly because of maintenance of organic matter and improved soil quality. And as said, this was first practiced by the farmers in US, but slowly it went off to Latin American countries, Australia and Russia and so on and so forth. And as of now, there are like 117 million hectare area under conservation agriculture based crop management across the globe, mainly in America, Central and West Asia, Australia, and in some part of IGP. For example, in India, there is increased adoption. In IGP, at some point of time, there was 3 million hectare under conservation agriculture, which we think is increasing slowly, steadily. In conservation agriculture based crop management, we see a dramatic change in this kind of altered soil, crop soil environment continuum. For example, the conventional agriculture was relying on intensive tillage, where we do minimum tillage, similarly residues, rotations and so on and so forth. The idea is to enhance the soil productivity, soil health and sustainable use of natural resources in order to make the farming more profitable. However, so far we do not really understand some of the associated things. For example, weeds. In conventional agriculture system, the weed and the pest are stable, whereas in conservation agriculture based crop management, these weeds and pests are less understood and a matter of investigation. In fact, these conservation agriculture based crop management options can be a potential solution to some of the production system constraint. For example, if soil erosion and runoff is a key issue which can cause multiple nutrient deficiency in the crops and terminal water stresses, you can solve it by cover crops or by reducing tillage and retaining a rational amount of crop residue. When I say rational amount of crop residue, I mean that the farmer, for example, is growing a rice wheat cropping system, he can keep 50% of rice residue and take off all the wheat residue or as per his need. We have seen that there is not much improvement of rice yield by keeping wheat straw, whereas by keeping some amount of rice straw, there is dramatic improvement in wheat yields over period of time. Similarly, if soil crusting, clodding and compaction is a major issue which can come by tilling over a long period of time, can result into poor stand, especially when it rains immediately after seeding. And the short term approach for solving these kind of issues is addition of green manures or bulky organic manures or the cover crops, whereas in conservation agriculture based crop management, retaining residues and reducing tillage can be a potential long term solution to this problem. Similarly, for surface hardness and subsurface hardness and plow pan, you like the old recommendation are using a moldable plow and then chiseler and then the subsoiler kind of thing, but to my understanding these kind of problems can give a kind of temporary relief to this major constant and lead to the poor growth of the crop plants and also multiple nutrient deficiencies. Whereas, just by avoiding deep tillage and retaining some crop residue, practicing reduced tillage can be a potential solution for this problem. Same is also true for the soil borne pathogens and climate aberrations. As of now, this is becoming a major problem where we are experiencing shocks and kind of heat stress or cold stress, and these kind of stresses can be solved to some extent by application of water, but also by reducing tillage and keeping residue in order to increase availability of water and better root growth of the plant. And all these practices have shown potential benefit in terms of improving productivity and profitability. For example, in double no-till rice wheat systems in Bihar, where I was working, and Dr. M.L. Jat in Haryana, we have shown that reducing tillage and retaining residues can increase productivity of rice wheat system and also increase the profitability of the farmer to the tune of $93 per hectare. We have experienced, for example, in this slide a case of Haryana, where Dr. Malik and his group was practicing zero till in sorghum wheat system. We found that the terminal heat stress to the wheat can be offset by practicing reduced tillage. As you see on the right side, the wheat is still green, whereas on left side in conventional tillage it is approaching maturity on March 30th. Similarly, in rice maize trial that I conducted in Pusa, we have found that the rice in conventional tillage system takes longer time and as compared to zero tillage. Zero tillage rice, for example, a long duration variety Rajendra Masuri can mature 7 days earlier and therefore leading to timely planting of subsequent crop wheat or lentil or maize. And this timeliness of planting had a great impact on maize crop, and we have seen over the years, for example, in 2008-9 much better crop in zero tillage on right compared to conventional tillage on the left, and therefore increased productivity of rice maize system in zero till rice maize on beds with residues. Similarly, on other crops, for example, the practicing permanent beds can improve the seed size and yield of chickpeas, can reduce potentially the moisture stress and the heat shocks in the soil of lentil in very dry conditions. We have also seen while working with the Icarda in the dry regions of Syria that if you plant for example, lentils or chickpea in zero till as well as in conventional tillage system, we always get relatively higher soil moisture in zero till, reducing tillage and leaving little bit of a residue, because leaving residues in the dry areas is a big challenge. But what are the key issues associated with the practicing zero till is crop establishment. For example, in rice, we have seen that the challenges are like seed zone dries out fast, there is very low humidity in the atmosphere, and evapotranspirative demands are as high as 10 millimeter a day. The rice seed has a husk that does not allow water to move in, and pubescence like uneven fields which can be dealt while doing direct seeding by applying a kind of good pre-seeding irrigation, adjusting seed depth to the tune of 2 to 3 centimeters and seed rest to the tune of 25 to 30 kilogram a hectare, and planting 7 days ahead of the historical trend of monsoon, and adopting leveling by maintaining uniform soil moisture in the seed zone. The second key issue, for example, in rice is weeds. We try to understand the weed ecologies in rice and found that in direct seeded rice, irrigation before planting triggers weed growth, and also the initial growth of rice in direct seeded is slow as compared in the puddle transplanted rice, where we transplant 30 days or 20 days seedlings which covers ground quickly. The weed flora is also complex in case of direct seeded rice, whereas it is simple in puddle transplanted rice. If we have very good control on water, normally we get very few grassy weeds. If there is no water, we get broadleaf weeds. To under contrasting situation, we can select a herbicide. And also there is issues with the critical crop weed competition period. The competition period under direct seeded is much larger, for example, from 15 to 60 days for a medium duration varieties, whereas under transplanted it is from 15 to 45 days. So, there is major competition by the weeds during early establishment phase of the rice, and therefore, the chances of yield loss under direct seeded rice is up to 90%. And we practice this. For example, here under tilled situation, and especially when uneven fields, we get lot of weeds by planting a long duration variety and planting late without residues and trying to manage wheat in the rice only. Whereas under permanent zero till system, in a laser level field or much level field, selecting a good cultivar, a vigorous cultivar and planting at right time, at right depth with good crop establishment, keeping some of the residues and adapting system based weed management strategies can solve this problem very easily. We have found that the key of weeds, managing weeds in rice is lying with the weed management in wheat, and similarly if you manage wheat properly in rice, you get less weeds in wheat. So, we need to adopt a system based weed management rather than the commodity based weed management. This is also becoming important when you have new ALS inhibitors and new chemistry coming in, when which have different residual effect on different crops, which can potentially harm some of the crops when you use a wrong herbicide in preceding crop. In order to select a right herbicide direct seeded rice, we need to understand the weed ecology. For example, if the rain in the season the rainfall is high, then we get more grassy weeds, and then we need to select a grass killer. If these are the perennial grasses in the field, we need to come up with a knockdown glyphosate application preceding, or if it is annual weeds, for example echinoclova, then probably bisbarybacterium sodium could be a right answer. Similarly, in a broadleaf affected field like ethoxysulfuron, sunrise, azimsulfuron and sometimes even 2,4-D can be a good herbicide option. So, to manage the weeds properly under conservation agriculture, the key elements are retaining some residues at least in one of the crop, leveling the field, eliminating or reducing tillage, because tillage brings in lot of weeds from the subsoil and also does not allow ants and kind of different fauna to come and eat on the wheat seeds. Select a right variety, early variety with early vigor that covers ground quickly. Planting should be done in clean field. Sometimes farmer plant their crops when weeds are already established, and under such situation the weeds are moving ahead of the crop and can cause potential damage to the crop. And therefore, if the weeds are there and you have planted the crop, you should try to manage weed, especially in the initial crop cycles. But once you start controlling weeds in initial crop cycles, later the crop growth is like covering field quickly, and there is less damage by the weeds. One of the key element here is rotation of herbicide. If you rotate herbicide, you do not get the complex weed flora or shift in weed flora, and therefore, it's kind of ecological management of weed, and also adopting proper spray equipment and spray technology to apply herbicide can also be implied in order to manage a better the weeds in a better way. The second issue is a machinery option. If some farmer want to adopt conservation agriculture based crop management practices, they often face the problem of uneven crop stand, and which is a potential damage to the technology. So, for farmers, now we have different type of machinery, right from the two-wheel driven small planter, punch planter or zero till machine. As you can see, this small plunge planter or the jab seeders can be used by hand itself. So, the conservation agriculture based crop strategy is based on reducing cost of cultivation, bridging yield gap between the potential yield and achievable yield by optimum planting on time with the right quantity of seed and right water management, nutrient management and improved soil health for sustainable food and livelihood security. I would like to conclude my talk by saying that the principles of conservation agriculture, utilizing available knowledge in the region and technologies, can be applied for improving farm productivity and profitability. It needs region specific fine tuning of technological practice. You cannot apply these technologies like anywhere. You need to do some kind of adaptive trials in order to refine the technologies for that particular ecology. Because the challenges are keep on coming, therefore, especially during initial years, you need constant monitoring to solve emerging problems, and you need a kind of teamwork with the different stakeholder, machinery manufacturers, input dealers, farmers, researcher, extension agents to foster adoption of conservation agriculture based crop management. Thank you so much for listening me. Thanks a lot.